Ghostly tales, yet mirrors of human life. Hey everyone! Welcome to Encountering Chinese, Ghostly Tales from Zhai. Today, I'm going to tell you a story called Who's Siniang? Qing Xiaoxi, a man from Jiannan, was exceptionally intelligent from a young age and had a talent for writing beautiful essays. However, his parents passed away early, leaving his family in dire poverty, and he had no means of livelihood. In desperation, Qing Xiaoxi went to the residence of Elder Hu, an official in the office of the Imperial Secretariat, seeking a position and hoping to make a living by working as a scribe. Elder Hu had him write an essay, and upon reading it, he discovered that it was not only beautifully written but also logically sound. Elder Hu, greatly impressed, said, "Such an outstanding piece of writing. This man will surely not remain poor for long. I will marry my daughter to him." Elder Hu had 3 sons and 4 daughters, most of whom had been betrothed to powerful and influential families when they were still children. The only exception was his youngest daughter, Siniang. She was the child of a concubine and had been raised without a mother. By the time she was 15 or 16, no one had come to propose to her. So, Elder Hu decided to marry Qing Xiaoxi into the family, making him Siniang's husband. When this news spread, many people secretly mocked Elder Hu, saying he was senile to marry his daughter off to a poor scholar. But Elder Hu remained unfazed. Not only did he prepare a simple yet elegant study for Qing Xiaoxi, but he also provided him with ample food and supplies. However, the young masters and mistresses of the Hu family were unimpressed and looked down on Qing Xiaoxi, and even the servants mocked him. Yet Qing Xiaoxi never argued, he simply immersed himself in his studies. While he read, the Hu family members often mocked him, even making noise with gongs and drums to disturb him. Qing Xiaoxi would take his book and retreat to his bedroom, continuing his studies undeterred. Before Siniang was betrothed, a soothsayer had come to the Hu family to read the fortunes of its members. The soothsayer went through the family, but said nothing about any of Elder Hu's children, until he saw Siniang. He was struck with awe and exclaimed, "This girl is truly a noble person." This statement spread and was soon turned into a joke among the Hu family. After Qing Xiaoxi was married into the family, Siniang's sisters often mocked her, calling her "noble person" with a tone full of sarcasm. Yet Siniang acted as if she hadn't heard, remaining calm and composed, ignoring their teasing. Over time, even the servants began to address her as "noble person." Siniang's maid, Guier, was furious at this, and in a huff, she retorted, "What, do you really think my master won't become a high official in the future?" The second young lady sneered and said, "If Qing Xiaoxi ever becomes a high official, I'll gouge my own eyes out." Enraged, Guier fired back without hesitation. "If that time comes, I fear you'll be too reluctant to part with your own eyes." At this moment, the second young lady's maid, Chuanxiang, interjected, "If my young lady breaks her word, I'll give you my eyes as compensation." This only made Guier even more furious. She clapped her hands with Chuanxiang and swore, "We'll see. You'll all end up blind." The second young lady, trembling with rage, slapped Gui'er twice across the face. Old Lady who overheard this, merely smiled and said nothing. Gui'er, clutching her face, burst into tears and ran to Siniang to complain. At that moment, Siniang was sitting by the spinning wheel, weaving thread. She listened to Gui'er's sobs and complaints but only gave a faint smile. She didn't get angry or say a word, simply continuing with her work. On the day of Elder Hu's birthday banquet, the sons-in-law of the Hu family came to pay their respects, and the gifts they brought piled up in the courtyard. The eldest daughter-in-law, looking at Siniang, mocked. "What kind of birthday gift did your family bring?" Soon after, the second daughter-in-law chimed in. "Is that all she brought, just 2 shoulders and a mouth?" Siniang heard this but wasn't angry. She remained calm and composed, with not a hint of shame on her face. Seeing that Siniang seemed indifferent to everything, the others started to think of her as a fool, and their teasing grew more reckless. Only Li, Elder Hu's beloved concubine, treated Siniang with courtesy. Li was the mother of the third young lady, and she often advised her daughter, saying, "Your younger sister is very clever inside, even though she looks simple on the outside. You children, with your sharp tongues, will end up with trouble in the end. You think you're so clever, but you're just fooling yourselves. And look at Qing Xiaoxi, who studies day and night without rest. With such ambition, do you think he'll always remain beneath others? You'd better treat Siniang well, or your words might bring you trouble." After hearing her mother's advice, every time the third young lady visited her parents' home, she made sure to treat Siniang with great courtesy, never daring to slight her. That year, thanks to the support of Elder Hu, Qing Xiaoxi was successfully admitted to the county academy. The following year, the provincial exam was held, but just at that time, Elder Hu passed away. Qing Xiaoxi, deeply grateful for his father-in-law's kindness, mourned his passing as a son would, and naturally did not take part in the exam. After the mourning period ended, Siniang handed him some silver and urged him to take the provincial exam and try to secure a place on the Zhai list. Before he left, Siniang advised him, saying, "The only reason you were able to stay in the Hu household was because my father was still alive. Now, things are different, and it is impossible to remain here any longer. If you pass the exam, maybe when you return, we'll have a place to stay." During his departure, Li, the beloved concubine of Hu, and the third young lady also gave Qing Xiaoxi a large sum of silver. Once in the examination hall, Qing Xiaoxi poured all his efforts into the exam, hoping for a successful outcome. However, when the results were announced, Qing Xiaoxi was not listed. It was as if a cold bucket of water had been thrown over him. He felt both ashamed and frustrated and couldn't bear to return. Fortunately, his finances were still manageable, so he packed up his books and headed straight to the capital. Upon arriving in the capital, Qing Xiaoxi faced another dilemma. His wife's family had many relatives in official positions, and he feared being mocked by them. So, he changed his name and fabricated a new place of origin, then asked someone to help him find work in the homes of officials. Censor-Li from Donghai, impressed by his talents, kept him as a secretary in his household. Not only did Censor-Li allow him to continue studying, but he also secured a spot for him as a gongsheng and sent him to take the exam in Shantian Prefecture. This time, Qing Xiaoxi was lucky. He passed every exam and was eventually granted a position as a shuji. It was then that Qing Xiaoxi finally gathered the courage to reveal his true identity to Censor-Li. Censor-Li, valuing him highly, generously lent him 1,000 taels of silver and sent servants to Jiannan to purchase a residence for him. Coincidentally, the eldest son of the Hu family, having fallen into financial hardship after his father's death and selling off family property, had a plot of land and a house for sale. Censor-Li's servants bought it from him. Once everything was arranged, Censor-Li sent a carriage to bring Siniang to the capital. Before this, when the news of Qing Xiaoxi's success in the exam reached home, the Hu family did not celebrate, but instead found the news grating. When they looked at the name and place of origin on the congratulatory letter, they saw that the name did not match that of Siniang's husband. Believing the letter had been delivered to the wrong place, they scolded the messenger and sent him away. Later, the Hu family was busy preparing for the wedding feast of their third son, and relatives gathered to enjoy the banquet. All the brothers and sisters were present, except for Siniang, who was not invited. As the house was filled with the sounds of celebration, a rider on horseback rushed in with a letter, saying it was from Qing Xiaoxi to Siniang. The Hu brothers opened the letter and were immediately stunned. At that moment, the women in the banquet room noticed the commotion and quickly went to fetch Siniang. The sisters were anxious, fearing that Siniang might be angry and refuse to come. However, it wasn't long before Siniang appeared, fully dressed and graceful. When the guests saw Siniang, some hurried to congratulate her, while others invited her to sit. The room once again became lively, with everyone's eyes fixed on Siniang and everyone listening to her speak. Yet, Siniang remained composed, speaking only when necessary, and refraining from idle chatter. Seeing that she bore no resentment, everyone breathed a sigh of relief and eagerly offered her drinks and apologies. Just as the merriment continued, a loud cry suddenly echoed from outside. The guests were puzzled and rushed to inquire about the cause. In a moment, Chuanxiang ran in, her face covered in blood, crying as if she couldn't catch her breath. The guests hurriedly asked what had happened, but she couldn't explain immediately. The second young lady, seeing this, scolded loudly, "What on earth happened?" Only then did Chuanxiang sob. "Just now, Gui'er tried to gouge out my eyes. If I hadn't fought back with all my strength, my eyes would have been taken out already." As soon as she finished speaking, the second young lady's face turned bright red, sweat beading on her forehead, and even the makeup on her face was ruined. The room fell silent, no one daring to speak. The guests, witnessing this, quickly began to leave. Siniang said nothing, only politely excusing herself to Li and the third young lady before departing in her carriage. After Siniang moved into the new house, her daily necessities were not yet fully settled, so old Lady Hu and her brothers sent servants, maids, and various household items to help her out. However, Siniang politely declined all of them, keeping only a small maid that Li had sent her. Soon after, Qing Xiaoxi asked for leave to return home to pay respects at the family tomb. His entourage was vast and imposing. Upon arriving at his father-in-law's home, he respectfully paid his respects to his late father-in-law, and then went to pay his respects to Li. The Hu brothers, hearing that their brother-in-law had returned, hurriedly put on their formal attire to visit him. However, by the time they arrived, Qing Xiaoxi had already left, and they didn't even catch a glimpse of his departing figure. After Elder Hu passed away, the Hu brothers fought endlessly over the inheritance, often quarreling heatedly, to the point that they failed to bury their father's coffin properly according to tradition. Years passed, and the room where the coffin was stored collapsed due to leaks, eventually becoming an overgrown mound of weeds. When Qing Xiaoxi saw this, his heart ached. Without consulting the Hu brothers, he chose an auspicious day to bury Elder Hu's coffin properly, adhering to all the necessary rites. On the day of the funeral, a large crowd gathered, including many prominent local officials, who, upon seeing that Qing Xiaoxi was handling the arrangements, praised him greatly. Qing Xiaoxi held a government post for more than 10 years, known for his integrity and honesty. Whenever his neighbors were in trouble, he would always do his best to help. Later, the second son of the Hu family was arrested for being implicated in a murder case. The presiding judge of the case happened to have taken the imperial examination in the same year as Qing Xiaoxi and was known for his unwavering adherence to the law. The eldest son of the Hu family, desperate, sought help far and wide. He sent a letter through his father-in-law, Wang, asking for help, but received no response. Growing even more worried, the eldest son of the Hu family thought of asking Siniang for help but was too ashamed to approach her directly. Instead, he brought Li's handwritten letter to Qing Xiaoxi's home. When he arrived in the capital, he dared not visit openly, so he waited in the shadows. Only after seeing that Qing Xiaoxi had left did he dare go to Siniang. His hope was that Siniang, out of family affection, would not hold a grudge over past matters. The doorman went inside to report, and soon, an elderly maid came out to invite the eldest son of the Hu family into the hall, where simple food was prepared. After the meal, Siniang, with a gentle expression, asked the eldest son of the Hu family, "Elder brother, you're usually so busy. What brings you so far to see me today?" The eldest son of the Hu family, unable to hold back, immediately knelt and sobbed uncontrollably, explaining his purpose. Siniang helped him up lightly, smiling as she said, "Elder brother is a man of great stature, yet you're crying over such a small matter. As for me, I'm just a woman, and I don't shed tears like this in front of others." The eldest son of the Hu family took out Li's letter and handed it over. Siniang glanced at it briefly and said coolly, "All of your sisters-in-law are outstanding women, and their families are influential. For such a small matter, you could have easily asked anyone for help. Why go all the way to the capital to find me?" The eldest son of the Hu family was speechless, unable to refute, and could only continue pleading. Siniang's expression darkened, and her tone turned cold as she said, "I thought you came all this way to see your sister, but it turns out you just want me to intervene in this lawsuit, hoping I, the noble person you spoke of back then, would help." With those words, she flicked her sleeve and turned, walking without a backward glance into her inner chamber. The eldest son of the Hu family, filled with shame and frustration, could only leave in anger, deeply upset. When the eldest son of the Hu family returned home, he recounted this humiliating experience in detail to his family. As a result, everyone in the household scolded Siniang for being heartless. Evenly criticized Siniang for being too unyielding and not knowing how to show kindness. However, just a few days later, the second son of the Hu family was unexpectedly released and returned home. The Hu family was overjoyed, mocking Siniang for not understanding human relationships, as they believed that even without help, the second son of the Hu family would have been released. At this point, Siniang sent a servant to visit Li. When the servant arrived, he was ushered in and respectfully presented a pouch of gold coins. "My mistress has been working tirelessly for the second master's matter and hasn't had the time to write a letter. She can only send some money as a token of her sympathy," he explained. Upon hearing this, the Hu family was stunned, suddenly realizing that the reason the second son of the Hu family was safely returned was all thanks to Qing Xiaoxi's secret efforts. Later, as the situation at the third young lady's household grew more difficult, Qing Xiaoxi was exceptionally generous in his help. Since Li had no sons of her own, he took her into his home, caring for her as if she were his own mother. Alright. That's all for today's ghostly tale, Hu Siniang. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Please also encourage everyone to comment and share more. We'll see you in the next episode.